All right, friends, we're going to be talking about Chapter 3 today, Management Theory and Human Resources. And this chapter is really divided up into talking about a little bit on theory of management and then delving into some characteristics of effective leadership. And as we go through that process, some of the decisions that a facility manager may have to make when going through their leadership process. And once those decisions have been made, talking about how human resources management comes into play as well. So some of the themes for this chapter are about being ethical, being communicative, making sure that the manager is using sound strategy as they go through their process as the facility manager. So the origins of management really shape up into several schools of thought when we're talking about management theory. The first theory is from Frederick Taylor of Taylorism, and Taylorism taught us that management is about motivating people to do a job in the one best possible way, and that any sort of job is going to be best motivated by money. But much of facility management here focuses on managing people. And when you are going through that managerial process, the question becomes, how are you best going to work with your litany of individuals and stakeholder groups? And although Taylorism talks about the one best way to effectively motivate employees, how you actually motivate employees and accomplish organizational goals, and then in the process, how to evaluate your goals, is going to be not just about the one best way to motivate people. Um, Taylorism was talking about using money to motivate people to do the best job possible, but the Maslow hierarchy of needs looks at more than just money. It says that in order to motivate someone, it's not just money, but it's also the job itself and the environment. And we need to satisfy specific needs that go through a hierarchy. So today, really what we talk about for management is the achievement of predetermined goals and objectives, which are really based off of the mission statement, while working with others in order to meet those goals and objectives. So those others would be stakeholders, employees, contractors, government stakeholders, etc. And really what we're trying to do is get the most out of people. And management theory is important because we're trying to motivate individuals to accomplish the goals and objectives of the organization. And nowadays we see that the best way to motivate someone, really, I would ask you what you think is the best way to motivate people, would be the combination of factors from a Maslowian standpoint that are going to motivate someone most effectively to work. So facility management might be about trying to manage the resources of a facility, maybe the materials and the different elements there. But personnel management is really managing individuals and people and your human capital. And I would ask you to think about, well, what is really the best way to motivate people? And think about what managerial skills are most important. Is it strategic decision making, or is it something a bit more nuanced, like trying to connect with your employee to best motivate them and to accomplish the objective as stated in their job description? So it might not just be, hey, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars in the bonus. No, we are going to hopefully use a holistic process that meets all of your hierarchy of needs, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Computer-assisted facility management is something that the textbook talks about as a way that's helped managers really uh, become more effective in accomplishing the goals and objectives for their facility. So you just need to think to yourself, well, how has computers helped me personally in my own daily life? Of course, access to information, being able to be connected to your job or to other individuals remotely certainly have been helpful. Helpful aspects of computer assisted, how computers assist us, and then think about computers from a facility manager perspective, and those aspects are even more multiplied that much more. We've seen how technology has integrated with business, and there are some primary areas that the textbook talks about that have really helped with facility managers. And we're talking about space and asset management. We're talking about computer-aided drafting and design. That's really helped with creating helpful with inventory and with design of property. Then we've also have capital planning, maintenance operations, real estate, support technology, et cetera, et cetera. And the textbook makes these 6 distinctions, and really they've all worked to be an integral element that's changed the workplace and made resources and acquiring those resources easier. The textbook then also talks about simple managerial strategies that can help make a facility and a manager more effective, and then by through the process, the employees that the manager oversees. And right off the bat, the textbook talks about being ethical. So ethics, I like this quote, in ethics and integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. I think that holds very true, because as one uh, spends more time in a career in a specific field, they develop a reputation, and that reputation is difficult to shake, especially for someone who feels like it's an unjust reputation. But a reputation really is one of the most valuable assets that we have in life, and I think that's very true. So using integrity and being ethical is very important, especially in situations that prove difficult. And we want to focus on not only the core mission and competencies of a facility, but also the core mission and competency of you as an individual. Because if we don't have a reputation, and that is something that guides us, our ethics guide us as a moral compass, then we really don't have much. So that's certainly important. Now, from a more pragmatic standpoint, the textbook also talks about time management and also strategies. And a survey not a few years ago had said that had focused on reducing the amount of meetings and red tape. And that really didn't have much of a change from a negative standpoint. In fact, reducing the amount of meetings had a positive cumulative standpoint. So cutting down employee meetings makes employees more productive. Why do you really think that's the case? And that might be a discussion for another day, but certainly something you might want to think about. But if you are going to have meetings, proper time management skills is important. So you want to make sure that people are coming to your meeting on time and then starting on time. And you want to make sure that you don't overuse PowerPoint. And make sure that all attendees are prepared. They're not playing on their smartphone or computer. They're engaged. They're communicating with you through both verbal and nonverbal communication with eye contact, and making sure that as the manager, you are engaging in steps to solicit their feedback. That way people not only feel like they're part of the conversation, but you might get some great information from them. So these are a few tools to facilitate better better outcomes through leadership strategies. And these are things that anyone can do in their practice as a sport manager and a facility manager. The textbook also talks about leadership strategies. And it makes a distinction between leadership and management. And what really is the difference between a leader and a manager? Well, certainly a manager manages and a leader inspires. And people work for a manager because they have to. Perhaps people work for a leader because they want to. So, what is really the most important trait for a leader? Anyone think about who was a boss that they really got excited working for? Who did they, what made that so that they actually wanted to work for that person? What made them want to buy in? Um, and think about that. And then once you think about that, maybe think about how can we become more effective leaders? What sort of traits and characteristics can we develop so that we can be not just a manager, but a leader? And you see this little example where you see the boss is the one uh, directing others to carry out the mission, whereas a leader is right there working hand in hand with the other employees to achieve that mission. And that sort of is that leadership by example. You're in the trenches with your colleagues, with your fellow employees. So some skills that the textbook sort of mentions from a managerial standpoint or a leadership standpoint. And this is sort of the big distinction. A manager has authority because they cause people to listen to them by making threats or are coercive, whereas leaders are charismatic. You want to work for that person. You want to do what they say because you buy into what they're saying. Um, Leaders lead by example. They show, whereas managers put on time constraints. Um, the manager has subordinates. The leader has followers. The manager maintains control. The leader maintains passion. Managers appeal to the head, whereas leaders appeal to the heart. Managers have a transactional style, whereas leaders have a transformational style. And think about that. Transactional leadership is where a manager, will get someone to buy into an objective and accomplishing that objective in the organization by um, inducing them with money. Say, we'll pay you X amount of dollars if you complete this, or we'll give you these benefits. Whereas leadership, this transformational style, is we're buying into the objective and the ethos of this organization and this leader, and we want to be successful not for a paycheck. Well, a paycheck is great. No, we believe in what that leader, what that manager is saying, and we want to achieve this goal because we believe in that person. Companies like Apple or these transformational companies that you hear in tech, or Nike, perhaps, Google, people buy into what the company espouses. It's a culture, and that really helps to create transformational leadership. The most important leadership skills, if we could really take it down to several, is that leaders are going to inspire and motivate people by their words and actions. Again, think about what really gets you going. If you ever had a professor or a teacher that you really bought into, that he really got or she got you going, or an employer that you really felt like you jumped out of bed and really got excited for the day. Uh, Integrity and honesty, again, living by values that we ourselves value. Most people value honesty and integrity. We want to work for people and companies that show that. Doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. Solves problems and analyzes issues, or has analysis of issues. Again, we want problem solvers. We want to work with people who can take care of issues. A powerful and prolific communicator. That way, we are constantly apprised of the mission of the organization, any sort of changes. We hate when we're left in the dark from our leaders. Again, these are important leadership characteristics. Acting collaboratively and showing teamwork. When someone's in the trenches with us, they're not on some high pedestal. They're not in a separate wing of the building. They're working with us, and building leadership, or building relationships and having meaningful relationships. These are all skills that I feel people can really identify with. If you think about sports organizations that display these, maybe the San Antonio Spurs or the Detroit Red Wings come to mind, where you have leaders who are inclusive, who are speaking out on issues that are important to their constituents, that help to really communicate a message that is shared amongst the stakeholders and building relationships. I think that these are characteristics in the sport industry that resonate. Now, in terms of managerial styles and choices that can be made, we're reaching a time where outsourcing is becoming increasingly more popular. And this is really something where a facility manager can potentially save money by just contracting out on limited engagements with companies that have expertise in a variety of areas. And it could be for facility management, for catering, for dealing with the HVAC, for dealing with maintenance, housekeeping, a booking agent. And so there's certainly pros and cons. If you are a facility and you sign up with someone like Live Nation um, or other AEG, these are international businesses that have booking businesses that have numerous clients. So a facility can tap into that leverage and secure booking deals with uh, reputable acts at a lower rate because they're working with that third-party company. It can also help with corporate support by working with other businesses that might have a increased interest in contracting with your facility. Outsourcing can reduce stress and time and finances by making it so that the organization doesn't have to pay those upfront costs or sink in those large costs. And then also it can help with taking some elements off the plate of a facility manager or a facility itself, and that facility manager can concentrate on their core competency or their core mission. However, there's also issues with uh, drawbacks. When you're contracting out, that means that the facility will have less control over decisions. It also hurts loyalty because now decisions are not lying with the stakeholders and employees internally, but a third party who's externally. Also, it can be very expensive if the company that's being contracted with is very expensive. So there are certain costs involved with outsourcing. Managerial decisions also impact who the facility wants to hire and who they will hire. Some examples in job opportunities could be a facility manager itself, which is the person who is going to be the CEO of the day-to-day operations going on with the facility. They need to have those both managerial skills, but also technical skills and communication skills. And the textbook does mention and highlight the importance of being communicative and maintaining constant communication, both through verbal and nonverbal communication. Of course, people to man the box office and deal with ticket distribution. Those are important. Security personnel, parking personnel, maintenance, finance, human resources. Of course, there's just a litany of potential employees. If you need a facility engineer, you need people to deal with the legal and human resource issues that come up. So there is just a real diversity of jobs. And then a facility manager needs to think about interns. Are you going to hire interns if there's a need? Are those interns going to supplant actual employees? And if so, then they must be paid pursuant to the Fair Labor Standards Act. And if you're not going to pay them, then what are they going to do to still help be beneficial to the organization, but not be to the point where interns who actually take the job of an employee by law must be paid? So there needs to be a rationale and background to be come to. What about independent contractors? Well, what is an independent contractor? An independent contractor is someone who performs a function or a job on a limited capacity with a defined beginning and end. And usually, that person who's an independent contractor does not really answer to the organization; they answer to themselves. So these are some basic elements of an independent contractor versus an employee, and we need to understand why it's why someone needs to be either classified as an employee or an independent contractor, because there's different legal burdens and potential liability if someone is a legal employee or an independent contractor, and we can talk more about that later in the legal issues that come up in with facility management. Of course, outsourcing can also take the the spot of someone that's been hired to do maintenance or parking or maybe just a whole litany. But let's say that someone does, if a facility manager does want to hire an employee, well, then the manager, along with different stakeholders in the facility, need to go through the hiring process, and that's the holistic process by which needs are identified, and then job announcements are put together, and then that person is hired, trained, and hopefully retained. First starts with the job analysis, which really highlights the basic activities and role that's necessary to perform the job that you want someone to be hired for. So really, you're asking in this situation, you're trying to put together a job description, and that's an extension of the job analysis of what is expected for the job. Who are you looking for? What are you looking for? Why is that the case? You need to have their background, the qualifications, what training is necessary, and what duties are necessary. And in my experience with helping to launch a professional women's tennis tournament, we created job descriptions by really asking, well, what do we want out of this position? What is the core goals? What do we want them to accomplish for our organization? That really drove the description and how we were advertising. Of course, with advertising, there's different ways to advertise. You can advertise through a pay service or through word of mouth. It's really depending on the financial strength of the company. Then we go through the screening of applicants and trying to weed out individuals who might not be strong enough to make it to the next round. So we need to use objective criteria and what candidates qualify based on the job analysis. So we need to make sure that there's basic strategies that are involved so that we can get the most qualified individuals who are going to be the most successful in this position. So then when we actually hire someone, we need to make sure that they're eased into the position and not overwhelmed, and that they are set up to succeed, that these employees are placed into the right job and set up for success. So the textbook suggests using the Maslowian hierarchy of needs in order to facilitate success, and this is the holistic approach. So making sure that not only the pay is there, but also the job description and the duties are something that can inspire them and make them want to work, that they can maybe be enticed by things like vacation or extra benefits or title or recognition, and then making sure that the supervisor is serving as a leader as opposed to a manager, and that this is something that can help hopefully make them a more effective employee. Of course, constant communication is also important. From an appraisal standpoint, there needs to be constant monitoring and constant communication. Perhaps if it's from a facility standpoint, the secret shopper program can be used, where a third party comes in who acts as a customer in the facility and then evaluates the performance of that employee and gets that back to the employee supervisor. That can be helpful for effective evaluation. And then from a termination standpoint, communication is also very key to improve the working environment and performance of an employee to avoid potential termination. So in the event that someone is terminated, that's going to cost the employee or employer money, because any change costs money. maybe a buyout if that's the case, or having to pay for a job announcement and the cost of hiring a new employee. And there's also the potential, the chance of a grievance occurring, which is going to be a legal process by which the circumstances in which one is let go are challenged, and there needs to be, in that sense, a basis for the firing that's not discriminatory. So that is something that's important. So through the hiring process, training is important. And why is training the employee so critical? Well, that kind of is self-explanatory in the sense that if an employee can be trained to be more effective, then the potential for termination is lessened and the potential for them succeeding is increased. So we need to think about several areas of training where training would be critical from the standpoint of also liability, because a properly trained employee is then going to prevent the organization from being subject to potential liability. So alcohol, service and management, crowd management, groundskeepers, these are all relate potential liability if a breach of the duty of care occurs with that employee. So if someone is visibly drunk and the attendant at the concession stand still continues to overserve that individual, that's potential liability for a Dram Shop Act violation. Crowd management, if someone starts a fight, that could lead to potential liability for the organization. Groundskeeping, if a field or the grounds have conditions that can lead to someone becoming injured, that also is potential for liability. So this really kind of segues us into talking about legal concerns about the management and hiring process. And as an organization goes through the hiring process, they need to make sure that they are mindful that they create a process that complies with the law. So not engaging in any sort of action that violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Americans with Disabilities Act. So making sure that the application form and questions are proper. You're not asking questions that relate to a person's race, alienage, or national origin in a discriminatory way, or the interview questions are poor. If you ask a person about a disability, even though that person, and don't hire that person, even though they can still perform the essential functions of this job, that could be a potential violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Lack of standardized documents makes the interview process arbitrary, et cetera, et cetera. Making sure that an organization is monitoring and evaluate personnel in a fair manner and securing those personnel files, that can be related to Labor Act, and then making sure that people are paid what they're owed under the Fair Labor Relations Act. Failing to have appropriate evaluation criteria, again, goes back to being fair and not arbitrary. Failing to provide a proper grievance process, again, that can potentially lead to legal issues from a labor standpoint if there's a union that's in place. And then not responding to employee complaints. Again, these are all related to issues involving unionization, which we'll talk about very shortly. Failing to promptly terminate an employee who is engaged in violent or egregious conduct. Again, this is just common policy for human relations. Not abiding by state, federal, and local law. These are very important aspects that an organization must abide by. So potential legal issues stem from different laws. So a union is an organization where a group of employees is going to band together to improve their negotiation leverage. It's for their own mutual aid and protection. So unionization is a legal way of employees working together and through their collective leverage, winning gains with the employer through the creation of a collective bargaining agreement. So the collective bargaining agreement can set forth baseline minimum salary, minimum benefits, a grievance process by which an organization must abide by, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a matter of law. Not all businesses have unions, but certainly unions are able to come in and organize employees. If a employer um, discriminates against the employees because a union has been elected, that's a violation of the National Labor Relations Act. So that's important for a facility manager to understand, as well as other leaders in the facility. Also, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that calls for anyone with a qualified disability to be provided a reasonable accommodation that will allow them to perform the essential functions of a job description. So that means that someone who can do the job in the job description, despite the employer providing an accommodation that's not unreasonably burdensome, that is required under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And of course, workers' compensation is a body of laws that basically says the employer, if an employee is injured on the job, an employer will provide that employee with medical benefits and maybe potential compensation in exchange for the employee waiving his or her right to sue for liability. And so that relates to OSHA and other personal injury laws on the books. And then finally, sexual harassment is something that a facility needs to prevent because of the potential for someone who's an employer to engage in inappropriate conduct with subordinates or co-workers. Inappropriate conduct would be in the form of either quid pro quo harassment or hostile work environment harassment. Quid pro quo harassment is where an employer with seniority or some sort of leverage forces someone who is subordinate to them to engage in some sort of sexual act as a condition of their employment. And the hostile work environment claim is any sort of individual in an organization engaging in conduct that makes the work environment unduly hostile to the point that someone is impacted by their ability to actually engage in their job performance is impacted. And then finally, to combat the potential for hostile work environment or sexual harassment, an employer should create an anti-discrimination policy and also educate employees on what is inappropriate conduct and how that inappropriate conduct can be reported and prevented. So these are some of the elements from a facility manager perspective about management and human relations. And a facility manager really needs to know what skills are necessary to properly motivate employees to effectively do their job and to get the most out of their employees. Are they going to be effective motivators or just leaders or just managers? Are they going to be leaders or managers? That's going to be important. And then a manager also needs to know the process of effectively hiring, leading, promoting, and terminating employees in order to comply with applicable laws on the books. So we'll come back to this later in the semester, but this is a great opening salvo. I look forward to your questions and discussions later.